Well, as a former residential school student myself, in 3 different schools over 14 years, the news when it came out hit me very hard emotionally. But at the same time, it was a wake-up call, I believe, to do something about advancing reconciliation. And I think the response across the country was needed in terms of what can I do about this situation. So yes, it was very hard emotionally, but at the same time, it energizes me to want to do more to advance reconciliation.
I think it's fair to say that it energizes everyone. An initial sentiment of being, I think, stunned and shocked by this revelation. What has been striking me throughout all of this is the way that people have been responding through symbol. All those presentations of the little shoes, that can't help but strike you in the heart, because it brings home very, very dramatically, very powerfully that we're talking about young children. And that triggers a whole raft of different emotions and imaginations and everything else. How could this be? And it does energize. I think it impels us together to say, all right, what went on? What happened? Let's really understand and work together to make sure something like this never happens again. And we just move forward in good relations and real reconciliation.
Well, I think it's very important to have a dialogue or a discussion on situations as they arise, like in this instance. For example, racism. I think the sooner you talk about racism and try to deal with it in terms of eliminating it or prejudice, it's the same thing here. I think it's very, very important that we begin a dialogue right away, talk about what happened or what our news was, and what we can do about working together to resolve the situation. How can we help the families? How can we help the communities? All that comes to mind when I think about the news.
And the way that the message came about was rather simple, actually. Chief Willie has been counseling me for quite some time on some work that I'm doing together with other bishops and other Indigenous leaders at a national level. And we already had an appointment schedule, a meeting schedule for me to come here to Maskwacis to talk about that a little bit further. And then as we were doing that, we had made the appointment prior to the news of the Kamloops discovery. So when we were together after the fact, we shared with one another that this is probably an important opportunity for us to speak and to speak together, precisely in order to emphasize how important it is to be in dialogue and not let this defeat us, not let this separate us, but in some way bring us even closer together, if that's possible, as we move together along that path of healing.
The message that people should take away from this, in my view, is that we must continue to work together. And if we haven't started on that path of working together, then we should be beginning to work together. I think it's all about a common joint effort on, again, as I say, advancing better relationships, advancing and restoring reconciliation. So it's very important that we continue to work together.
I would echo that. The only thing I'd want to add is I hope people can take away from this joint message that it's possible to find the way forward. It's possible to have good relations. They already exist. They've existed for quite some time now. I think Indigenous peoples, together with church representatives, we've been working hard on this for quite some time. And there's been a lot of good things that have been accomplished. I think we need to keep that in mind. Long way to go yet. And we just want to keep assuring people that when we have these terrible, terrible revelations that come to us that recall this dark, dark chapter in our history, the history of the church, the history of the nation, we need to learn from it and grow from it, but never to let it defeat us as we move forward on a path that we know we really must follow, and it's possible to do it.
Well, let me start with the second part of the question. As far as the journey, I don't think it's a time-framed journey in terms of, yes, now we're reconciled. I think it's an ongoing effort to build relationship, ongoing effort for joint activity, an ongoing effort to pray together. I think that it's not a time capsuled journey, I would say. So we try our best every day. We keep our efforts going every day. And then along this path, yes, we'll find good results in many different ways. But as far as reaching an end point, I think that should not be a barrier or a consideration. It's the effort of working together that's more important, I think.
In terms of the meaning of reconciliation, I've chatted with a number of Indigenous leaders about this, and in fact, Chief Willie, you'll remember one night I came down here for a sharing circle with some people here in Maskwacis, and there were a lot of former chiefs that were there, and you were there, Chief, also. And I still remember one of the leaders saying, "I wish somebody would finally tell me what reconciliation actually means, because we've been hearing about it so much." So it can be a little bit elusive. But I keep going back in my mind to something that Chief Willie taught me, and I don't know if you remember, but he was talking to me about the meaning of the nearby town here, Wetaskiwin. And of course, I'm mispronouncing it, right? It's Wetaskiwin, I think you... Close. But anyway, it means good relations, correct? Having good relations. And as soon as I heard it, I thought, that's the heart of reconciliation. We can have good relations. It is possible. And when we accept that it's possible, when we desire it, when we work towards it, and just simply get to know one another, sit down, face to face, person to person, hear about the story of the other, appreciate the gifts of the other, the mutual sharing of gifts that can happen, that all flows out of having good relations. And I think if we can grasp onto that and grow with it, then we're moving along that path of what reconciliation means.
Well, I don't think it's a time for pointing fingers or blaming. I think it's a time to pause and search out solutions. What were the problems? What were the causes of those problems? And what are the solutions? And lastly, what is the best solution? I think that time spent on those areas is better than blaming someone or something else.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I would just want to add that to say that, certainly on the part of the church, is not to try and avoid any responsibility. All right. So yes, it was part of our history, and we have to acknowledge it, learn from it, atone for it, and all of those things, which we've been doing for quite some time now. I know since about 1991, there have been a number of apologies that were made by the religious institutions that were participating in the schools over those years, and the bishops too, and I've done it, on behalf of the bishops of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. So we've got to own it. We have to own it. We can't run from it, and we really have no desire to run from it. At the same time, acknowledging the truth also means, okay, how do we carry on the journey together? And that's the key thing that we can't lose sight of, it seems to me, right now.
I would add, if I may, it takes the same amount of time to be negative as to be positive. So if you take a side to choose from, I would prefer that we spend time on the positive, because it's easy to tear something down or blame something or be negative. And it's a little more strength-taking in terms of building something better, stronger, that will unite us. And I think that's where the focus needs to be.
Amen to that.
I've actually visited literally across Canada on invitation, a lot of different places, a lot of different events. And I'm very, very encouraged by what I see, what I feel in terms of the effort that people are making on reconciliation. They didn't wait for the green light to go on. They started on their own to do activities about reconciliation. I've talked to judges, for example, in a judicial community. I've talked to lawyers because that's my profession. And I find out what they're grasping in terms of searching for a solution on how can they either change the way they do things, change the way they work, so that it will help make things better. My most favorite, of course, is the sports industry. I see a lot of good efforts being put forward by professional hockey teams, professional football, professional baseball, and also other sport events that I've participated in myself. And I see that the honest and genuine effort that they're making, because they have an immediate impact on a large, large audience. And when they get engaged in reconciliation, the impact immediately, it grows. I've talked to private industry where companies are saying, how can we change our policies to make things better? I've talked to academia, universities, colleges, schools, with students, with staff, and they're asking the same question: what can we do to make things better? So there's a lot of good things going on across the country, in the Canadian society as well, by different faith groups or by different clubs, organizations. But what's missing is a coordinating effort. We need to find that mechanism, and we actually suggested on a call to action a National Council for Reconciliation. That would be an independent body that would look at what's going on across the country. Where can we learn and share from each other and build on the good things that are going on? I think that's the missing piece right now, but work is coming, and we're working towards that, and hopefully soon that we can begin to establish that.
I would not presume to add to that. Chief Willie is one of the 3 commissioners that guided and governed that whole truth and reconciliation process. So he is the expert, and I certainly couldn't add to anything that he would say on that particular point.
Well, when I see young people undertaking initiatives on their own for making things better as they see it from from their eyes, that gives me a lot of encouragement and excitement, really, for a hopeful future, because it's their future that we're handing over to them from what we've inherited ourselves. So I'm delighted at what the young people are doing, and that really encourages me. Compared to, for example, where there's a loss of hope with young people. And I've seen that as well. And we need to work on that as leaders, to promote hope, a more hopeful future for the young people, where they may have lost a bit of hope in terms of the the future they see for themselves. But the bright side of it is the many great things that young people are undertaking to make sure that there's a good future for them, and in a way that it's I keep going back to it, but a better relationship with each other.
You know, what gives me hope is the way I see the citizens of the land we call Canada gradually awakening to the gifts of Indigenous culture. There's a depth, there's a richness there that the rest of this country really needs to understand and to grasp. I think of a few things in particular. Well, the respect for the land jumps out at me. Right, we're very, very conscious generally in our country and globally too around environmental issues. The First Nations people have been sensitive to the beauty and the strength and the voice of the land for centuries, and they have so much to offer to the rest of us in that perspective. I've long been struck by the willingness of Indigenous peoples to take whatever time is needed to listen to the other person. We're living in a world of noise. We're living in a world of sound bites. We're living in a world where we really don't want to listen to the other, especially if the other's voice contradicts my own sentiments. We'd much rather cancel the voice or cut them off or not invite them. I have not found that in the Indigenous culture. They will take the time to listen. And that is such a clear expression of the profound respect that they hold for the other's dignity. We really need to listen to that. And the final thing, and I've seen it every time there's a gathering, Indigenous peoples refuse to allow the Creator to be eclipsed. Right? We're living in a secularizing society, broadly speaking, where God is pushed to the margins, where faith sometimes in its expressions is silenced or seen as a private affair. I have not found that among First Nations peoples. Listen first to the Creator. Pray first to the Creator. Thank the Creator. We as a country need to recover the centrality of God, the beauty of God, reverence for God. And I think as we're moving forward in reconciliation, the First Nations peoples, this is a wonderful opportunity for us to hear that and learn that from them as well. And I hope we learn that lesson. All of that for me is a great signs of hope.
I would say as a final note that sometimes I'm asked, what can I do to help or advance reconciliation? And I always come back to the same answer, and that is, first of all, read the calls to action. Listen to the call that's speaking to you, and then make a commitment to implement that call, in particular that's calling on you for action. That would be my message to anyone interested.